As we get into the 6th week of our Follow series, I just want to start with a little personal story. Some of you know, others don't. When I became a follower of Jesus, I realized very quickly that I was a biblical illiterate, like completely ignorant of the Bible. Not that I was a stupid person. I did go to college. I got an undergrad in business, but I had never opened the Bible. Like in one of our first Sunday services, the pastor says, open to the Old Testament book of, and I had to lean over to my brother and say, what's an Old Testament? No clue. No clue. So because of that, and because I had fallen in love with Jesus and I wanted to learn about God, I decided to go to a place that teaches people about God. So I did the logical thing, the same thing all of you did, right? I enrolled in seminary. Isn't that how everybody learns about God? Okay, so I'll admit it was maybe a little over the top. I had no intention of coming to ministry. I had a really, really good job in the civilian world. I just wanted to know the Bible, and I wanted to know about God, and I wanted to learn about God from people who had spent their lives studying God and studying the Bible, and that's what seminary professors do. So I went to learn about God from some very smart people. Now, I imagined going into this that I would read a lot of Bible, and I did. I imagined going into this I would have classes in what I now knew to be an Old Testament and a New Testament. I knew that I would have to take some classes on how to actually defend the Christian faith, and that's called the study of apologetics. I expected all of those things. Every now and then, though, a professor throws a curveball at you that's just out of left field, completely unexpected. And so I was in a leadership class, and I read the list of books that are required reading. One of the books on there was a book called Good to Great by a guy named Jim Collins. And so here's a brief description of that book. Good to Great, Why Some Companies Make the Leap and Others Don't, is a management book by Jim Collins that describes how companies transition from being good companies to being great companies, and how most companies fail to make that transition. Well, of course, everyone would expect that to be required reading in seminary, right? I didn't get it. It made no sense to me. I mean, my reading list was already like, it would kill you. And he's going to make me read a book about secular companies and how they went from being good companies to great companies. To tell you the truth, I was kind of ticked that I was going to waste my time on that instead of reading something godly. But then once I read the book, I discovered his purpose in making us read that had nothing to do with the companies themselves, but the why they had gone from good companies to great companies. It was a book about leadership. So welcome to week 6 of Follow. Today's lesson is on leadership. If Jesus is a teacher worth following, for the last 5 weeks, I've tried to get us to a place where we would agree with that Jesus is a leader worth following. Well, then he's a leader worth learning from on how to lead well. Now, I know many people don't often think of Jesus in a leadership role, at least not in a conventional sense as a CEO of a company. But the reality is, if you look at how many people are following, he must be leading. If you look at how many people are following, he must not only be leading, but leading pretty well. If you look at what he accomplished in such a short period of time, then I think we have no choice but to consider Jesus one of the greatest leaders of all time. Think about it in a secular sense. So he launched a brand, right? A brand called Christianity. Back then it was called The Way. For us, it's called Christianity. He launched that brand new brand in only 3 years. And it's been incredibly successful by any measure. I think Collins would put him in the good to great category. I mean, think about it. In 3 years, he launches a brand new brand that is still alive over 2,000 years later. He launches a brand that now has thousands of franchises globally 2,000 years later. Name one company today that you believe is going to be alive and well with thousands of franchisees in 2,000 years from today? I started brainstorming myself. So all you Apple users, I'm not an Apple guy, never will be, but I look at Apple and I see a pretty darn good company. Do you think they're going to be around 2,000 years from now? Pontiac, right? Pontiac's dead. They already went out of business, right? Chick-fil-A, they're bound to be, right? Starbucks better be. At least from my perspective. The reality is they could be. There is a possibility. And the reason they could be is if they were to pay attention to Jesus as he teaches his disciples and through them us, the principles of leadership. We're going to study together from the Gospel of Mark. Those of you that like to turn there, please do so. Mark chapter 10. I'm going to start at verse 35. I invite you to be there with me. I'm going to read the entirety of the passage that we're going to draw from today, and then I'll go back every now and then, and we'll just see if we can pick out some leadership principles that Jesus has. Then James and John, sons of Zebedee, came to him. Teacher, they said, we want you to do for us whatever we ask. What do you want me to do for you? Said Jesus. They replied, let one of us sit at your right and the other at your left in your glory. Well, you don't know what you're asking, Jesus said. Can you drink the cup that I drink or be baptized with the baptism that I am baptized with? We can, they answered. Jesus said to them, you will drink the cup that I drink and be baptized with the baptism I'm baptized with, but to sit at my right or my left is not for me to grant. These places belong to those for whom they have been prepared. When the 10, meaning the other disciples, heard about this, they became indignant with James and John. Jesus called them together and said, you know that those who are regarded as rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them. Their high officials exercise authority over them. Not so with you. And I want you to, just like highlight and underline that in your brain. Not so with you. Instead, whoever wants to become great among you must be your servant, and whoever wants to be first must be slave of all. For even the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many. So I really do want us to pay particular attention to those words. Not so with you. See, he's about to teach them a leadership style that was totally countercultural then. It is countercultural even today. Because he was teaching them that anyone who claims to follow Jesus and is in leadership, well, he's directing them to lead in the way that we're about to learn. See, when Jesus said, not so with you, it wasn't a request, it wasn't a suggestion. Jesus wasn't giving advice. If you're going to lead for me, if you're going to do what I have for you to do, you're going to lead my way, not their way, because their way is wrong. Not so with you. Jesus just witnessed in these men the same ambition, right? And the same desire for status and stature and power and position that seems to be universal among human beings. Don't we instinctively go after the best job at the highest pay? We may start in the mailroom, but we have this dream and this vision of one day occupying the corner office. We seek after inclusion with the popular crowd when we're in high school. I know it's been a long time since I've been there, but I believe that dynamic has not changed. That's the crowd everybody wants to be a part of. And who doesn't love being teacher's pet? We learn at a really, really young age that if I am bigger and stronger than the other toddler in the room and I want his toy, I just take it. One toddler is really happy and the other one is screaming and then a number flashes on the screen, and you have to go get them. Isn't that how the world works? Look out for number one. If I'm in charge, I'm making this all about me. So what I didn't tell you was, and I didn't start earlier in the passage, you can read that if you want, but the few verses just prior to this passage that we're getting our teaching from, they're on the road to Jerusalem, and Jesus is reminding them one more time what to expect. He says, hey guys, I just want to remind you what's going to happen when we get there. See, because this is only days before he is about, it's going to be his last trip to Jerusalem. He tells them things are going to get ugly. Now remember, I've told you before, and it's about to come true. I'm going to be arrested and betrayed and beaten and crucified. I'm going to die. And in that moment, of course, you would expect a little different reaction than James and John saying, hey, can I be in the corner office when you get to your kingdom? Like there's no sympathy. There is no, oh, poor you, or dang, I don't want that to happen. No, all they can think about in that moment is what's going to happen to me when all of that happens to you and you rise. Then the other 10 chime in. No one seems to be real worried about Jesus' fate. They get angry as well. Why should you be the CFO? How come you get to be the vice president of marketing? I've been here from the beginning. I work just as hard. And you hear the argument. I don't know about you, but if I'm Jesus watching this go on, I'm just shaking my head. 3 years we've been together, and you still don't get it. In some ways, I think it should freak him out, because these are the men that he knows are about to lead the movement. The franchise is being turned over to them, and they have no idea how to lead. So seeing his opportunity, he takes them aside and immediately begins to challenge their paradigm of leadership. He says, you know that those who are regarded as rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them, and their high officials exercise authority over them, but not so with you. Guys, we don't do things that way. We do things different. See, I'm trying to help you understand the way the Romans are doing things is wrong. You know that. The way the chief priests and the Pharisees run things, it's wrong. They think only of themselves. They desire a life of luxury, and they're willing to get it at your expense. But not so with you. You're going to lead my movement, and you're going to do it my way. I'm going to teach you what that is, because the way they do it, well, it's just not so with you. You probably have examples in your own lives of either working for or seeing a boss that's a dictator and a tyrant, and how the people that work underneath that person act and react. And you've probably seen examples of leaders who lead well, who actually care about the people that work for them. Winnie and I were stationed in Germany in 1990. Our tour was about up, and I had made arrangements to go take over a maintenance shop up in Holland. It's about 3 or 4 hours north of where we were. And the guy in charge, I knew him. We had met several times at different conferences. We'd had lots of conversations. We both do the same job in different places. And I knew the kind of leader that he was. He was that stereotypical military leader that barks orders and expects people to jump when he says jump. He was a harsh man, a dictator, tyrant kind of leader. And he used to tell me that the guys that he was leading were pretty lazy. These guys do absolutely nothing without being told. I have to tell them what to do, how to do it, when to do it, and then things get done, but they don't get done very well. They just do enough to get by. So Greg left for the States just as I arrived. We transitioned leadership, and it really didn't take long for me to see that he was right about the behavior of the guys in the shop. They lacked initiative. They basically did nothing without being told. And I got to thinking about that and asking the why. And then I discovered, really by accident, that it was his leadership style that was the issue. See, his leadership style was driving the behavior of the people that followed him. And once again, I discovered it by accident because I have a very different kind of intuitive style. I'm a collaborative type of person. I like to work together to get things done. And I know that's not the normal military way, but it's how I'm wired, right? So I was there 2 days. It was Friday afternoon, and every Friday before going home, we had to clean the place. And by clean the place, our maintenance shop was probably 3 times the size of the stage. And our job was to strip, mop, wax, and buff the floors every Friday before we went home. Well, it's Friday afternoon. One of the guys finally goes, well, if we're going to go home today, guys, we've got to get this floor done. Nobody's very thrilled about doing it. And so as he suggested that, and the rest of them agreed, and they got up to start doing what they were supposed to do, I took off my uniform shirt, and I put it on my desk, and I walked in the back room, and I grabbed a mop and a mop bucket, and Joe Bedford, one of the guys that worked for me, just stood there. Sergeant Barnes, what are you doing? So we got to get the shop clean, right? Yeah, but Master Sergeants don't do that. So well, why not? You think because I got a couple more stripes in my sleeve than you do that I forgot how to hold a mop? Dude, I want to go home as much as you do. The more people that do the work, the faster we all go home, right? And they all just stood there in shocked silence. Over the course of the next few months, I picked up toolboxes, and I went out to work on airplanes with each one of those guys. I came from, and I was very, very good at working on this jet. This is actually from the unit I was assigned to at Spangdahlem. It's an F-4G. It's an incredible airplane, and there isn't a single one flying today. Tells you how old I am. I was really good at working on these, but you see, I just transferred to a base that flew these. And I didn't know how to work on those yet. And I wasn't expected to work on those. That wasn't my job. Turning wrenches was years ago. It wasn't now. But I wanted to learn the jet. I wanted the guys to know we're in this together. And so I picked up toolboxes, and they taught, and I learned. And we created a pretty darn good relationship. And amazingly enough, things changed. Things started getting done without anybody being told, and they got done well. And what I learned from that experience is something I think Jesus is trying to teach his disciples, is it's amazing what happens when you choose to be a leader that does not lord it over the people you work with, but instead you choose to be a leader that has a mentality that says, how can I serve you? It's funny what happens when you serve and serve with other people. That's what Jesus needed his men to know and understand. See, the leaders of the Gentiles, they lorded over them. Not so with you. Now, I want you to understand that Jesus isn't against strong leadership. In fact, he's all for it. He is not about being passive. He's fine with decisive, take charge men and women in leadership roles because he gave us intellect to do exactly those things. What he's against, and this is a big deal, what he's against is me leading you for me instead of me leading you for you and for the good of the company, for the good of the franchise, for the good of the movement the movement that can't fail. If you work for me and you believe I'm only here for me, what's your natural reaction? I'm going to look out for me. Who's looking out for the organization? Well, nobody, because I'm in it for me and you're in it for you. We're just hoping things go well with the franchise. Good will never become great in that kind of environment. The company, or in this case, the movement, will fail. And we can't afford, Jesus couldn't afford for this to fail. Because plan A for salvation is the only plan there is. There's no plan B. It's got to work. Because humanity's eternity depends on it. And in these few days before Jesus goes to the cross, he needs to help these guys figure out what it means to lead that movement and what it's going to take. See, following Jesus means people lead in a way that those who serve under them have confidence that you're for them, not taking advantage of them. That's how Jesus leads, right? Was there one thing that Jesus did that was about Jesus? One thing that Jesus did that was for Jesus? Everything Jesus did was for you and for me. Everything. And that means all of the hard work and all of the pain and the beatings and the cross and death was all about us. None of it was about him. And that's the style of leadership that Jesus calls each and every follower of Jesus to have. He said, I came to serve, not to be served. So Collins, if you ever read the book, Good to Great, he calls this level 5 leadership, and he defines it this way. A level 5 leader, someone who blends genuine personal humility, selflessness, with intense professional will. Their ambition is first and foremost for the people, not first and foremost for me. Their ambition is first and foremost for the people, the institution, and not for themselves. Collins didn't invent that. Jesus did 2,000 years ago. And Jesus didn't call it a level 5 leader. I believe Jesus called it servant leadership. It is the single best leadership model known to man, servant leadership. We've been spending, this is our sixth week, and I've been trying to promote the whys of following Jesus and the benefits of following Jesus. And we know that following Jesus and what he teaches, whether you believe in him as the Son of God or not, is immaterial. If you follow Jesus, life gets better. If you follow Jesus, life gets better because the things he teaches, the things to do, the things to don't do, well, they just make your life better when you do and don't do. Now, doesn't it make sense? If you have a boss who follows Jesus, should not your work life be better than if you follow a boss who doesn't? And if you're a boss or a business owner, and you're a Jesus follower, and your leadership style is more about lord it over than it is servant leader, you need to hear Jesus' words in the same way that he was describing it to the disciples. I believe in that moment where they had gotten in the fight and he pulled them aside, I think he looked each one of them in the eye and said, that's how the Romans lead, not so for you, or you, or you, or you. Not so for you. I think he was emphatic about his leadership style. And the point is, if you are a leader of an organization and you lead more like the Romans and less like Jesus, not so for you. If you want your company to thrive and your people to grow, not so for you. If you and I are going to follow Jesus, then by golly, we should learn how to lead like him. I want to actually dive just a little deeper into how this plays out practically in our lives. It's great conceptually, and it's a wonderful philosophy. But how does it work in reality? In the beginning, as you read those verses, all of this was spurred by one question. that was asked by his men. Will you do something for us? Jesus responds, what do you want me to do for you? That may be the greatest nugget that you can take away from here if you are a leader of any kind in any way in any organization, whether you lead one or hundreds. Maybe the best thing you can walk out of here with is an understanding that asking that question to the people who follow you may be the most impactful thing you can do from a leadership standpoint. What do you need me to do for you? How can I serve you? What can I do to make your job better today? What can I do to make your job easier today? Now, I realize this is countercultural, all right? It's a paradigm shift. I realize the boss is supposed to tell the people what to do and not ask them what they want or what they need to have done. If you desire to lead the way the world says lead, as Lord and Master rather than servant leader, well, then that's your style. But if you choose to lead as Jesus leads, to leverage your authority for them instead of for you, to serve rather than be served, to have the humility to put the needs of your people in your company before your needs, well then, just learn to ask that one question. What do you need me to do for you? So for those who are workers and not the boss, I just wonder, how would you react if tomorrow morning your boss walked up to you and said, hey, I am here for you. What do you need me to do for you today to make your job better or easier? Would you just laugh? Would you faint dead away? Because some of you work for the tyrant boss, and that would just be weird. In fact, you can't imagine that it's ever possibly going to happen. Would you just stand there in shocked silence the way my guys did? But what could happen? Imagine for a moment that you are the boss and you ask that question. And the employee simply says, well, you know what? I've been thinking for a long time that if we take this and we move it over here and we change that and move it over there and we actually put these in this kind of an order, man, my day would go so much better. And I could get a whole lot more done if I could just change the process a little bit. So what you want me to do for you today is give you permission to change the process and actually make it more efficient. Okay, go for it. Let's give it a shot and see how it works. And now let's just imagine it works, and it works well. Look what you've done by asking one question. How can I make your job easier today? What do you want me to do for you? What happened was you have a process that's now more efficient, that's better for the company. What you have is an employee who feels valued by you, who sees that they have your trust and your confidence. And you know what that's going to do to that person? It's going to cause them to look around for other places where the next time you ask, what do you want me to do for you? I'll have another answer that makes my life easier and makes the company more efficient. It's a win-win-win proposal, all because you chose to ask one question, driven by a leadership style of the one that you follow. All because you realize the boss is here to serve, not to be served. I'm going to tease this out just a little further in the wrap up. Some of you are out there thinking, well, I'm not a leader, and I'm not the boss. But the reality is everyone leads someone. Everyone leads someone. If you're a parent, you lead. If you're in a relationship, you lead. If maybe you're in none of those things, at the very least, you lead you. right? Everyone leads someone. This leadership principle applies to each and every person, no matter what age or what your status or stature or power level or corner office looks like. Some of you are that informal leader of your groups at school. Some of you are in, let's say, dating or marriage relationships. There are leadership things that happen. If one chooses to lord it over the other, I'd say that relationship is not going to go well. But couples who ask the question, what can I do for you? And if they practice humility, selflessness, you know, the odds for their success increase exponentially because they've just communicated, I'm not in this for me. I'm in this for you. I want you to thrive. What can I do for you? Paul figured this out. He taught again on a very similar lesson in the book of Philippians in chapter 2. He says, do not let selfishness or pride be your guide. Instead, be humble and give more honor to others than yourselves. Do not be interested only in your own life, but be interested in the lives of others. Notice it doesn't say neglect yourself, beat yourself, don't worry about yourself. It says do that, but actually consider others better. Consider them first. In the workforce, you may not be a leader now, but doesn't everyone hope to learn and grow and develop and progress? You start in the mailroom, but you have your eye on a corner office, and that's a good thing. So why don't you start developing those leadership principles and that leadership style now so that you can actually put it into practice and apply it when you arrive? It makes sense to learn how to lead like Jesus now so you can actually lead like Jesus later. And finally, there is probably no place where servant leadership is more important than right here in the local church. Ministry only happens because people choose to donate their time and their talents to serve God and to serve His church. The reality is you don't serve like a paycheck for a paycheck. See, when you serve a tyrant boss, a dictator boss out in the workforce, the only thing that keeps you there is the paycheck. Well, if we're not giving you a paycheck and we want you to stay here, then I think we need to treat you the way you deserve to be treated. I think ministry leaders need to understand you may lead a ministry and you lead people, but you're here to serve the people that are serving the ministry. See, if we can learn to do that, once again, it's a win-win-win. The people who lead the ministries that you choose to serve in, I pray that they come to you every now and then and they say, how can I make things better? How can I serve you today as you serve those in our church? See, if we do that, well, the individual is going to thrive. The ministry is going to thrive. And more importantly, the movement that Jesus was so passionate about when He taught His disciples how to lead well, well, that ministry continues to thrive. Amen?